Welcome back to another episode of Acceptable Chess. I am your host, John Harden, here again with National Master Andrew Hoy, and we are looking at some live battles in round 3 of the Acceptable Chess Autumn Classic. Andrew, who are our first combatants this evening already playing?
Yeah, so we've started the game. We're just into the first few moves, and the game is between Charlie with white and Alex is black. Both of these guys are doing very well in the tournament so far, so it'll be an interesting matchup, and the result of this game will really launch one of them into the lead of the tournament and probably set them up well to win the whole thing outright.
Fantastic. Yeah, it sounds like an exciting matchup, and I think we've got a couple more of people who are at least in contention coming through the rest of the evening, so we should see some good games tonight. It looks like we had a King's Indian defense as a start, but the players have already made some deviations from that.
Yeah, so let's take a look at the opening. So it's a normal King's Indian so far. And now I like d6. I realize you can also castle. D6 just prevents all of this e5 stuff, so you don't have to worry about it. And now we see a bit of a sideline with h3. This is a modern approach. White's idea is to play a quick h3 and g4 and try and clamp down on black's f5 break. And by stopping that break, you take away all of black's normal plans, so black has to come up with something new. It's a pretty nice way to play for an advantage. I think that the advantages in the main lines can be bigger, but it becomes a thing of preference. So this is a perfectly normal way to play, and I like the approach from Charlie.
Very good, very good. Yeah, so things proceeded pretty quickly thereafter. It looks like Alex made the choice to castle. We had some fairly normal developing moves, and the first thing here that really sticks out as strange to me, maybe a6, a little bit unusual, but really this move d5 took me by surprise. I gotta think that normally this trio of pawn moves seems like a lot of tempi spent in the opening, and we're normally supposed to go with some kind of an e5 idea, right?
Yeah, especially after a6. A6, the idea would be to play for b5, and b5 and e5 work very well together. b5 and d5 are less compelling. So already I think white can grab a pretty large advantage by playing something like e5, either taking on d5 first or playing e5 right away. And
Yeah.
and here we go. I think e5 was played, so I think this
Yeah.
is going to be a nice little edge for white.
Right. Yeah, Alex proceeded by jumping his knight into e4, and then Charlie responded by capturing once on d5. Right, Alex was forced to recapture, and then Charlie simply castled.
Yeah.
So we have one more developing move, and then bishop e3. So a fair amount of so far, a fair amount of unresolved central tension here. I guess Charlie does not want to make the decision to take this knight yet, which I can understand. I think it would sort of unseat his f3 knight, maybe, and cause some problems. But Alex also not looking to get rid of his best piece in the center.
Yeah, I think maybe castling is almost premature. White might have been able to play for even more by delaying castling and threatening to take on e4, and that would resolve some of the central tension, probably to white's benefit. If we jump back to this position, maybe something like bishop d3 looks interesting.
Right. Yeah, threatening simply to take twice. I suppose. Yeah, I guess if you were to play something like bishop d3. After bishop f5 seems logical, but then maybe g4.
Yeah, and that looks pretty nice, and I don't see a way to take advantage of the way that white's playing. Like knight takes c3, pawn takes c3, bishop e4. White can simply take on e4 and move the knight somewhere, and I think that black's structure is really, really crippled. Already it's almost impossible to hang on to this e4 pawn. Something like f5 is going to run into this, and bad things are going to happen on the g file.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, that I was thinking about taking en passant to get rid of it, but I realize now that it's probably not worth a pawn to get rid of this really excellent space squeezer.
Yeah, exactly. And maybe white can really flaunt his lead in development and reroute the knight to one of these squares and just say, I'm never going to castle and I'm okay with that.
Yeah, it's funny how if the king had castled, I would feel much scary, much
Yes.
more scared for both sides, really. But here, I have to think that white can scuttle away if he needs to.
Yeah, and look at black's queen side. It really has no future.
Yeah, yeah. Sleepy time over here, as
Mm-hmm.
I have given to referring to these positions as the sleepy queenside. Okay, very good. Jumping back to our current position. I would say, given how frantic things are going to get as we start trying to juggle 4 games here, I'm going to take this opportunity to just read out our player bios for our 2 combatants that we've already seen start.
Yeah, that sounds
Um,
great.
so, with the white pieces, as we said, we have Charlie. Charlie's a health actuary now living in Denver, Colorado. He started playing chess as a young boy when his father taught him and his brother the rules. We may have seen his brother playing in this very same tournament. His interest in chess escalated with the Fischer Spassky chess match in 1972, and he feels that playing chess is very much like playing the piano. And I think I can understand that. I think there are certainly a lot of drills that you have to go through in both pursuits. Now, as for our commander of the Black Forces, Alex says that he started doing chess puzzles as a diversion, and that ended up being a gateway to actually playing. He's particularly interested in the visualization side of chess, and he's recently been trying to think about the notation of the moves as they happen, which may pay off in the long run, but presently is rather distracting. One of his goals as a player is to learn more about the endgame, although he admits he could use improvement everywhere. Now, I suppose that's probably true for most of us.
I would say it's true for all of us.
Yeah, that's true. Maybe not Magnus Carlsen. I don't really know. But yeah, it's funny. There's something interesting there in what Alex said to me about this idea of thinking about chess notation as it happens and that presenting a challenge. I feel like you and I were raised on over the board chess. There really was not, even though it wasn't that long ago, there was not nearly so much internet chess as there is now. And it was harder to do and not as well run. And so the idea of sort of the computer taking care of your notation for you is a little bit foreign.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. And I think the notation was still something that you would think about. And even now, when I'm calculating lines, I usually do it in terms of notation to keep it straight. But I think it's interesting to try and focus on that specifically and really think about what's happening as you make these moves.
Right.
So after f5, I think black is very close to re-equalizing. I don't see a good way for white to chase the knight away in a productive manner.
Yeah, that is a very well cemented piece. I have to think that he's feeling pretty okay there. I suppose we could try to remaneuver, right? Play something like knight to d2 and f3, but I have to think that's going to cause more problems than it'll solve. As a matter of fact, I suppose actually we don't quite have the tactic of f4 there, do we?
I think we do.
Oh, can I? Oh, can I not take on e4 in response? Oh, I suppose you can.
The
still
bishop's still trapped. Is
right.
When all is said and done.
Knight d2, f4 takes here.
Oh, I was going to take on here. I think we can run away to e1, and however sad this looks, we're alive.
Right. But you were looking at something else.
I was looking at taking here first, and I don't see a good square for the knight.
Right. Yeah.
Something like this, it just looks pretty lousy already. I think the dark squares are going to be pretty bad.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess Charlie's a bit stuck there.
But yeah, again, I don't think knight d2 makes much sense here. It's not really a move I'd consider for too long. Maybe taking on Poussin is the best practical approach.
Right. Yeah, that makes more sense. Of course. I suppose I'll take with the bishop. I don't know. I don't think I want to block my bishop in by taking it with the e-pawn.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And here I think we really have to play for e5 control. But again, I think this is a pretty comfortable position for white. I'm sorry, for black. Something like b4 to chase the knight to a worse square. Maybe queen b3.
Yeah.
Here at least it feels like I have something.
Yeah, I think so. I think you're absolutely right. I'm just investigating. We are supposed to have one more game starting in just a couple of minutes. Let me see if I can run a quick check in with those players. But in the meantime, let me see also if we can take a look at our game that was this played this morning between Rufus and Chip.
Yeah, that was a fun game. Let's pull that up now. So it looks like we started with a King's Gambit, and Black actually declined the Gambit by playing Knight C6 on move 2. So this is an interesting way to play to try and avoid some of the sharper theory and to unbalance the game right away. We had Knight F3 and now F5, and I think this is a fun line to play for Black, even if it's not the most objectively testing line for the white pieces. So here, the usual approach is to take on f5 and e4 gets played, and Black has some good compensation in the middle, despite the fact that he's going to be down a pawn temporarily. And this game, Knight c3 was played, so we get kind of a symmetrical structure. I like d6. I think it's a normal developing move. And now I don't really like h6. I think this weakens the light squares too much. And knight takes e5 was played in the game. And that's a nice, strong tactic for white.
Yeah, I saw this move h6 too as a bit of a problem. I think I was saying to Chip later after the game that it looked to me like, despite playing for a very open and attacking position, that he perhaps felt a little bit uncomfortable. I think this is his first time using it in a serious game. And I think h6 shows a certain I want to go home kind of desire to simplify the position and play a different kind of game.
Yeah, although it was interesting, I think Black actually climbs back into it. Knight takes e5 is a creative way to play to cover f7, and now after f takes e5, Black said he would gambit a pawn, and instead now Black is going to play for some dark square control. And unfortunately, White just missed this fork and was very compliant and allowed this queen h4 idea. And now I'd say that Black's winning, despite the fact that these pawns are very, very nice. So White does have some reasonable, practical chances, even though he's down a piece.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It was interesting. A very wild and chaotic game. I liked this move, Queen C6, to consolidate with threats, and castling. Although the king is one of the more open kings we've seen, I thought this made sense too. And then here, I think some of this same maybe lack of fighting spirit, right? Chip being a little inconsistent, right? Sometimes showing great tactical acumen and alertness, and other times I think being a little bit too scared to get out there. Because right here, after the exchange sacrifice by Rufus, I think Chip's just got to take this.
Yeah, I agree.
Something like Queen H5. I think the king just goes away, and
I don't like King D8. I think that is going to allow some of these tricks that might not be necessary.
Fair enough. Yeah, I guess I thought I'm sort of fine with.
Yeah, I guess I was looking at something a little bit crazy like King D7. The idea is that it's a little bit hard for White to come up with a good check. Something like this is going to help Black develop, and even here now we can hide on D8.
Ah, yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, and in the event of something like Queen F5, I guess maybe we just do all the same things. Where now Bishop G5 is not possible because my rook isn't. My rook won't
Again,
be
it's
on
very
free.
concrete though, and to be honest, this isn't so bad to deal with either. I think this is a reasonable position as well. So it's probably pretty good for Black no matter what. If you count the material, it is an extra rook.
Right. Yeah, so I think probably after that point, the game started to get a little bit less interesting again. Although, maybe not, right? I keep forgetting there are a lot more twists and turns in this game, right? The rook, excuse me, after it comes to f7, Chip remaneuvers his pieces and manages to actually lock that piece in, which does create a little bit of awkwardness. I mean, I suppose Rufus would be justified in sacrificing,
right?
Just because he's already collected one piece, so getting one more would be maybe enough. But at least Chip developing his pieces and creating some active opportunities. I suppose maybe his last chance is coming shortly after he grabs here and plays queen to f7. I think this whole position is starting to unravel, and maybe he needs to do something about, um, well,
Is
something to
rook
consolidate his
d6
pieces.
winning a piece?
Rook d6. Ooh, good question. Yeah, I guess.
Yeah, that looks pretty good.
Yeah, I guess that must have been his last shot there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that seems pretty powerful. Although now I'm looking at this, maybe black is still even okay after king to b8. Queen takes e5. Maybe now just rook h to f8. Right, we can threaten the knight, start pushing him away. It's a little bit more difficult, but yeah, white has an awful lot of loose pieces hanging around. I guess we can still take chances here.
Yes, definitely.
Hmm. But in any case, yeah, I think so. King b8, queen takes e5, rook to d6. Now is just one moment too late. The king coming to b8 creates too many opportunities, and knight to d7 check is really very pretty. I have to give him credit. The
Yeah.
fact that in order to survive this, black has to try and find something like king to c8, because the obvious recapture, which Chip understandably played, ran into queen takes h8.
With a back rank
And
mate.
yeah, just a really, really pretty mate. This bishop hanging and yet able to deliver the full point. Um,
Fun
I,
game. A lot going on.
yeah, right. It's a really cool game. And
Yeah.
frankly, if I wasn't trying to find our next game, I would want to spend more time on it, but I'm a little bit curious what's going on. I'm going to check in with our players here
Yeah,
and
it doesn't
see.
look like it started yet, so we'll have to wait and see. I think there are a couple games starting at 7:30, so we might have
Um,
that coming up soon.
yeah, you know what? There may have been waiting on us. Let me check.
Yeah, all right. Let's hop back to our live game while John's checking on some of that stuff. Um, and it looks like after f5, white chose to play b4 immediately. So this foregoes the opportunity to take en passant, but it's going to disrupt this knight, and this knight is going to have to find a new square. Knight c4 doesn't look so appetizing. It looks like we can take, and I think these center pawns are going to be a little bit too strong. Something like this, and already it's very hard to hang on to that e-pawn, and d5, e6, d6, that type of stuff is too strong to let it happen. So instead of going forward, black went back to c6. After knight c6, white did in fact play queen b3, threatening d5 right away. e6 was played to shore up the center, but this makes the bishop look a little bit silly, so we'll see if white can take advantage of that. A couple of normal developing moves
Sorry about that.
as we move along. And here I think this is maybe a critical moment to look at. White ended up taking on e4, and we'll have to see if that ends up working out for him. I'm always a little bit reticent to take on e4 and let this strong pawn come to e4 instead. The f-file can be very strong, and it's hard to find a good home for this knight.
Yeah, and I think also it looks to me like the b pawn is hanging, so I'm not convinced by this play.
Yeah, I am okay with giving up the b pawn because the rook will come to c7, and I think we have reasonable compensation for it. If anything, I'd say that it's a scary position for white to face because of the f-file pressure. Something like rook f7, queen f8, bishop h6 looks normal, maybe followed by knight e7 to f5. Let's see how it went. White played knight h2, and black actually took on b4 with the queen. So here I think I would very happily trade queens and put the rook in on c7. And I think white has excellent compensation for the pawn and is probably better. It looks extremely difficult to hang on to e6 indefinitely. Something like bishop g4 puts pressure there. The knight can someday reroute itself to a good square. Maybe this to get around to c5. And instead, white dropped the queen back to c2. And that looks reasonable as well, especially if you want to keep queens on. bishop d7, and now white plays rook b1, and this is actually the live position.
Fabulous, fabulous. I am in the midst of pulling up another of our games that has started between Tyler and Rob. So it looks like Tyler's gone with his trusty old sidekick, the Nimzo Larson attack. We're not too far into this game yet, but it looks like we had b3, Rob taking control of the center at least part way with d5. Some pretty sensible moves, I think. I'm not really sure what the theory is of the Nimzo Larson. I have to admit, I don't know a lot about it, but it makes sense that Rob has not played e5 yet, since his knight would be pinned. So it looks like maybe this bishop d7 move is an effort to try to get that in at some point.
Yeah, this is all normal looking stuff. There are many ways to play it. If black does play a move like e5, a lot of times white can go f4 and knight f3 to start pressuring that.
Right. Yeah, that seems like a very standard idea that I've seen before. So yeah, we'll have a little bit of time before that gets too thick. And it looks like yet a third of our games has started, so they're coming fast and loose now. After a little bit of a holdup, I'll throw that game into the study as well. We have this battle between Chris W. and Nick, which is just getting underway. Both players just making their opening moves. So just give me a moment, and we'll have that game for you as well.
All right, so it looks like we had a couple more moves in the game between Tyler and Rob as well, but I guess we can take a quick look at the game between Chris and Nick. Have we gotten very far in that one?
It looks like I'm having just a little bit of trouble getting the URL to work, so I'll just be just one more second. We should have this up in the study. Yeah, Lichess refusing to copy the moves, although it's copying the game.
Yes, you'll have to do it the old-fashioned way.
Yeah, I guess so. Looks like we had... Actually, things are going fast and loose here. So we had d4 by Chris, followed by knight f6, knight f3, d6, knight c3 with bishop g4, h3 was played, putting the question to this bishop. We had a trade on f3. I can't say that I like taking with the pawn there. I mean, I suppose there's no law against it. Chris will be able to build a very large center this way, but I've always taken it to be more natural just to take that opportunity to develop the queen. But we'll see how that goes. Certainly without having castle to that side, it should be at least reasonable. G6 and e4 were both played, as has been recorded. And then black played e5, making his break in the center. And this does allow, which Chris took advantage of, an exchange of pawns followed by an exchange of queens. And, you know, I'm looking at this, and obviously losing the right to castle for black is significant, but in an endgame position like this, where white does have some doubled pawns, I don't know that this is so bad for black. Andrew, what do you think about this position?
Yeah, I think this is a slightly improved version of a King's Indian exchange variation. And here I think white's doing extremely well because we have the quick idea of bishop g5. And it's actually pretty hard to defend. I think if we play something like a bishop g7, which looks normal, there are going to be ideas of knight to d5, which is again very strong, especially in conjunction with castling. I think already the only move is something like knight d7. So probably black should play bishop to e7 in order to defend that way, and we'll have to see if this works out after something like castles. Again, I think we probably have to play king e8 just so that we're not going to run into mating ideas, and then already something like knight b5 is a little bit of a problem.
Yeah, it looks like these players have not taken any interest in making use of the time control, because we've got already 10 moves of non-theoretical play with with about a minute and a half of each of their clocks used. So we had very quickly bishop g5, bishop g7, as you discussed. But now instead of knight d5, which I agree would be very strong, we had queenside.
Oh, castles first. Okay.
Right.
And then Nick blocked with the knight. So we
right.
end up almost back to the same position that we were talking about before. I guess White now has a few extra options, and he doesn't have to play knight d5.
Yeah, I would have thought that king to c8 would have been good there by Nick to take advantage and get out of the pin as quickly as possible.
Yeah, you're probably right. So is something like f4 and e5 winning? We can't really take because I think we're losing a piece here. There are too many pins going on. Of course, black doesn't have to take on f4 here. I think we can probably play h6 now. And despite the fact that this looks scary, we're a little bit ahead, and this would be okay for black with the bishop.
Right, right. Yeah, I think the only other thing I was considering was, as before, after f4, maybe just playing king to c8, and the idea there being that after f takes e, I could take back with the knight. What do you think about that idea?
I don't know. So if we don't play h6,
yeah, maybe then f4 just comes again, right? I mean, he does have two f pawns, so maybe something like this is a little bit troublesome.
Yeah, certainly you're much worse. I don't know if it's winning for white. Something like this, I think we'd have to move the knight back. Although,
yeah, maybe just back to d7. I mean, well, is knight f3 playable?
It's probably playable.
Yeah, maybe then bishop takes and then e5. Yeah, I think you have to be doing quite well there. The knight might be trapped.
Probably I'm giving up this bishop and playing on the f file. And with two rooks in the game, this knight has a hard time moving because of bishop g4, and there are going to be some mating ideas. So there's a lot going on, and it's a little bit scary.
Right, right. Okay, so we'll leave things back at this knight g7 move. It looks like we're having a very fast game over there, but I do want to check in on some of our other players. Shall we return and see what's going on with Charlie and Alex?
Sure.
Great. I will endeavor to get that updated right now. I have to say, first effort juggling 4 games. It's a lot more going on than I'm used to.
Yeah, do we have the 4th game started yet, or is that starting soon?
It looks like it's starting soon, but not yet. So
we had left off after we traded on b4, and then white played rook b1. Black moved back to e7, and now white grabs the b pawn here. And after a few more moves, rook c8 kind of lining up on the queen, queen to b2. Knight a5 hits the rook, but that's a little bit of an awkward square for the knight. And here white played rook to b6. I think I might have preferred rook to b4 to try and control this c4 square a little bit.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Being able to take twice there so that black cannot sink even the rook on c4 would still be a minor victory, pressuring the a4 pawn.
Yeah, exactly. And after rook to b6, knight c4 was played, white is more or less compelled to take. He doesn't want to lose material. And again, I think this is starting to look pretty good for Alex. I like the position. I do like the bishop pair. Something like a5 now looks forced to avoid losing the a pawn. That is, in fact, what he played.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I might be willing to double rooks and sacrifice the a6 pawn even in order to get onto the 7th. So yeah, this is starting to look a little bit scary for white, and it's interesting that everything is so tenuous that black was able to fight back so quickly.
Yeah. It's interesting, this level of chess, right? There's a lot more back and forth. You don't see quite as often. I think that's one of the reasons that we make note of it in the roundup is there's a lot more at the higher level. You'll see somebody hold serve, and when an inaccuracy happens, use that as a hook to, kind of pull open the entire position and cruise to victory. But down here in the trenches, we see a lot more changes in the lead.
Yeah, exactly. I think here I would probably play bishop b5, cutting off this rook, putting the bishop on a nice square, and then I can double up later without any concerns.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I mean, there are even perhaps ideas eventually, given enough time, of getting a dark squared bishop over there, but probably that's as towards your rule of thumb, that probably takes us more than 3 moves to accomplish between the 3 the bishop needs and moving the queen. So maybe that's a little bit too magical Christmas land.
Yeah, I would also be comfortable playing queen f8 and bishop h6 at some moment.
Yes, yes, of course. Yeah, trading off this bishop and getting rid of a piece that's not doing much at the moment. Is that your thinking?
Yes, exactly, and it makes f2 pretty weak.
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Especially if the bishop's on b5, stopping a rook f1 idea.
Yes, very good. Yeah, I see that. Yeah, it all hangs together. Very nice.
Yeah.
And as far as Tyler and Rob go, so we left this game as it was just leaving the opening. Looks like Tyler made the decision to play this c4 move, which I think is some improvement over the game that he played last week. I believe that was his game against Bill was played last week, and you made this exact suggestion, yeah?
Yeah, I like the c4 break. I think this is much better than playing d4 prematurely. We will probably also play d4 sooner or later, but this way we can do it at our leisure, and it starts to break open the center for white. So the rest of the moves e6, shoring up d5, but doing nothing to really contest this long diagonal. Right, and now we see normal developing moves by both colors. And here we take on d5. I don't know that I love c takes d5. Maybe d4 instead makes a little bit more sense.
Yes, yeah, transitioning out of the Nimzo-Larsen into something more classical, really, after d4. You know, the sort of immediate opening has ended, and we're going to end up in something that looks much more like a normal game of chess.
Right, exactly. And again, I think both moves are probably acceptable. Something like this does give the the d4 and the e5 squares. Tyler took advantage of that. He hopped right into e5, and black, I think, reasonably gave back the bishops. But I think we can already say that white has a long-term advantage. This c file is very nice for white. Ideas like knight a4 to cover c5 are in the air. Maybe something like d4 to really lock down this pawn. But again, it's kind of a temporary advantage, and we really have to do something quickly to solidify that. So we'll have to wait and see what happens.
Right, of course. Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. I will take a moment here and get in another one of our player bios, so that I want very much by the end of the night to have hit them all. So speaking of this game, before we go away from it, Tyler with the white pieces is originally from Florida, but considers himself practically a New York native now. He's working as a chief of staff to a serial entrepreneur. That's cereal with an S. This man does not make breakfast foods. He feels a desire to get back to writing his screenplays. His chess experience up until now has been very sporadic, although he did participate in our Bachelor Memorial Tournament this summer. His experience with the game largely was limited to, sounds like, getting beaten pretty badly by his father on a regular basis, who would say things like, "Let's just try something," before Tyler's position went up in flames. So that's sort of his general level of experience. He also wanted to note that he feels extremely honored that Bill prepared for his Nimzo-Larsen last week. He feels that to be worthy of preparation must be a good sign. And I think he's looking to get his first win in this tournament. Tyler did have some very nice games in our Bachelor Memorial, one of which ended in a stalemate, but I think he is still out here seeking his first blood victory against one of these players, and I think he's probably going to pick it up at some point in the next few rounds.
Yeah, I think he's gotten very close already a couple of games, although Robert's not necessarily the player I'd want to be playing if I were out to win a game, so we'll see how that goes.
That's true, yeah. And speaking of our player with the black pieces, he's originally from Sioux City, Iowa, but went to college and medical school at McGill. We did meet him this past Sunday. We talked a little bit about him during another one of our live commentaries. He's currently living in Alexandria, Louisiana. And like his brother, also playing tonight, his interest in chess began with Bobby Fischer in '72 around the World Championship. So he is an interesting player. It's always wonderful to have players coming from around the country. And I like the way he's playing tonight. I know I've been haranguing him to get after the center and make sure that he respects the power of it. I don't think this game is perfect, but it's certainly not neglecting the center. So I feel pretty okay about Rob's prospects in this game.
Yeah, let's take a look at the next couple of moves because I think it was an interesting way to play.
Great.
Tyler castled. At some point, you have to castle, and Rob immediately plays c5, trying to break everything up. And after queen e2, now d4 was played. I go back and forth on d4. It's a very committal move because you're accepting this dark square structure for all eternity. You
Right.
really don't ever want to take on e3. That would just be positional suicide. So Tyler moved the knight back to d1, and now queen d7 was played.
I
And
have
this is
to
actually
think
the live position.
I have to think that knight a4 was the more normal move there.
Yeah, although I don't mind this either. I think the knight can kind of come back to life after moves like f3 and knight f2, and kind of a slow way to play. At some point, we're also going to play queen c4, so if the knight is on a4 already when queen c4 is in, we're threatening to win c5. But I think it's at least reasonable to bring the knight closer to the king so that you don't get checkmated.
Makes perfect sense. Makes perfect sense. It does look like this is interesting. Something about Lichess not updating right away, but it does look like our fourth game of the evening is underway, which I am relieved to see because it means that all of our chickens are in and we can start grasping, getting a firmer grasp on everything that's going on. So we have this battle between Matt and Aaron. Looks like it is very, very early in this game, and we are just seeing the opening couple of moves. Matt opening with his favorite, I assume, the London system. Yes, and here the bishop does come to f4, which I know is a typical play for him. And Aaron choosing a very standard setup so far with his pawn on d5 and knight f6. So we'll let that game get a little bit more developed before we spend too much time. But it looks like fairly standard play from both players. Actually, looks like, as we continue, that it's a bit of a mirror match. Bishop f5 was played, followed by e3 and then e6. So Aaron deciding the best route to equality is, if it's good enough for you, it's good enough for me. Perfect symmetry so far.
Yeah, let's jump back to our first game, though. That looks like it's off to an interesting continuation. After a5, black played rook a4, hitting the pawn. White swapped rooks on the back rank. And after this, I think we actually had... Let me see if I can find the actual move score. Do you have that in front of you? Was it queen e8 played now?
Yeah, let me see if I can get there. You're on move.
Yeah, it was queen e8, queen b6 hitting this pawn, bishop b5 to defend it, and now white played g4, and this is again the live position.
Right.
So white is trying to come up with some counterattack against the king, because black is very close to winning this a pawn, and that would be a decisive advantage if he can hold on to it. But unfortunately for black, there's a long middle game to play before he can close out an end game. And I think, again, white is back in the driver's seat if he can get this rook to c7.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm realizing now that maybe it's not quite what I want to do, but maybe I can play this bishop h6 idea to get rid of that bishop and hop a knight into f6 at some point. I know it's going to be weakening to this d4 post, but it's sort of too tempting. To
yeah, and
miss,
we actually have queen e7 played, and that looks like a pretty large mistake because it's going to allow rook c1 right away. This, I think, forces rook to c4, and after trading, I think we take back with the bishop. I don't really want to deal with this really crippled pawn structure. So after bishop takes, I think that we have bishop d2 to b4.
Right? Yeah, I see that. Yeah, I see that idea. Yeah, that's tough, right? I mean, it's so tempting to want to take here and have a pass pawn, but those look like popcorn. Doesn't seem like those are going to be able to hang on in any kind of endgame.
Right. Although maybe because of the dark square pressure that white is going to have, maybe we do that anyways, with the idea of just having some distraction that we can sacrifice later.
Yeah.
But again, I think this is starting to look good for white.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, I think Charlie probably pretty happy with the position he's got so far.
Yeah, and let's take a look at the game between Chris and Nick. It looks like Nick has solved some of his problems. So let me pull up the last couple of moves that we just had. So after knight d7, knight d5 was in fact played. So now it's, again, a tough position. And here Nick made a mistake. I think he hangs this rook. This was played. And I think white's up a pretty decisive amount of material, even if black is starting to dig out. So now f4, h6 was played. The bishop drops back to h4. Nick played knight c5, just trying to get active and get something going.
Right.
White defended that with f3.
Missing, I think, a kill shot, right, with f takes e?
Yeah, I think you're right. This looks like it forces g5, but we take with check, and then the bishop can drop back and is still alive.
Yeah, that would be an unfortunate ending. So Nick caught a break there, but all right, continue.
But we get that a slightly different way. After pawn takes, e5 was played, and now after g5 takes with check, Nick took back with the king, and we're waiting for white to play a move like bishop f2, and this looks like it's an entire rook up for white.
Oof. Yeah, that's it's going to take a real serious trick for Nick to get out of that one.
Yeah, that looks pretty bad. So it's funny how quickly that went well for white and went poorly for black.
Yeah, it just goes to show. To me, this feels like a lesson in speed. You know, I think little things like knight takes c7. I mean, I know that Nick is somebody who's going to pick that up, and I think it's just a question of sometimes moving a little bit before you're ready can create these little blunders that unfortunately it's so hard to come back from in a game like chess.
Yeah, exactly. So I think we can leave that game for the time being.
Yes.
It looks like we have a couple more moves in our top board game between Charlie and Alex. So instead of rook c1 here, instead we had the move bishop h6. After bishop h6, what did black play? Rook b4 was played, and now white takes on g7, and this is our position again. So here again, I still like white. I think that there's a lot going on with this knight. We do have to kind of worry about bishop e2, but again, I think rook c1 threatening rook c7 looks like plenty for white.
Yeah. I guess maybe bishop d7 temporarily defends both threats. That's not a bad look. But
I think
that'll
we can
also
grab a6.
Yeah, I was about to say that'll also hang the pawn. So maybe.
And that doesn't
maybe
even
no real
really
help.
solve the problems. Just to show an interesting line, I think rook c7 and queen a7 are coming, and that looks like it's way too much, especially in conjunction with knight f6 to put yet another attacker on the bishop.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah, looks like trouble.
Yeah, it does. So we'll see if he finds rook c1. That would be a pretty nice way to start to close out the game.
Yeah. What's going on with our friends Tyler and Rob here? Let me see if I can get that game updated.
Yeah. So I have some of the moves in front of us.
That's
It
all right.
looks like after this position, white played a4. Rob decided to start attacking on the king side with bishop d6, and now Tyler grabs on d4. And here I think probably black should take back on d4, solve his doubled pawns. I don't really want to give up the dark square bishops. This is a nice discovered attack, and we're also gaining a tempo against the rook, so something like knight e3. This looks like it's starting to look pretty good for black despite the lousy queenside pawn structure. So that would be an interesting way to continue. Instead of taking back on d4, however, he played knight g4, and he's immediately threatening bishop takes h2.
Right. Right. So yeah, I'm expecting G3 to happen there.
Yeah, G3, and now Black played Queen F5, and this is the live position. We see that there's a relatively simple threat of Queen H5 and Queen H2, which is going to be a little bit hard to meet.
Yeah, does look like Tyler's got a resource here that this Knight E3 move though should solve all his problems.
Yeah, if he plays it right now, that would work.
Yeah. Yeah, so we'll see about that. Game's moving very quickly.
Yes. Yeah. And what happened in the game between Charlie and Alex? It looks like we had a queen trade somehow. Let's go back and take a look at that, because that's very strange.
It looks like your move, rook to c1, did not happen.
Okay.
Looks like instead Charlie offered queen to c5, offering the trade. Maybe forcing the trade. Now I think about it, because I think the rook is hanging. So Alex took him up on that, and after that exchange, and then rook to c4, knight came to f6, but Black picking up a valuable pawn. Now I like these center pawns. I mean, I don't think that this was the transformation that Charlie should have been looking for.
Yeah, this looks completely winning for Black.
Yeah. Yeah, wow, amazing. I think the advice that I would give to Charlie there going back is that a simple rule of thumb. Actually, I discussed this with the Battle of the Daves last night. We were talking about when your opponent's king is less safe, as I think it's inarguable that this Black king is under more danger than the White monarch. When your king is more safe, you want to avoid trading queens. So I think Black welcomes this opportunity, even if he doesn't pick up material, just because the amount of different checkmate and pinning threats that are on the board is too much to be borne.
Yeah, and even more than that, I think it's pretty clear to me that there are too many weak pawns, and it's going to be too difficult to defend those. And I think the game has borne that out. This is our current position, and it looks pretty over already.
Yeah, Charlie going into stop the bleeding mode with rook to a1, trying to hang on to his pawn, but we'll see what Alex's endgame technique is like, because Charlie certainly is a wily player. We saw him steal a game from Aaron in a losing position just last week, so I'm not ready to count him out yet, but yeah, this is not looking good.
Yeah, so how do you like this move? Black could play h5 here, and this knight has no squares.
Wow. Yeah, that's picturesque. That's so fascinating. It just goes to show it's something that we usually see with the pawns as they get further and further up the board, but this idea of big space advantage turning into overextension as people leave the party.
Yeah, exactly. I think one very simple way to close out the game after h5 would be rook c4 to a4, threatening to pick up this last pawn, and that would force white to trade rooks. And after that, the white king is the only piece that can move at all, and I think it's going to be not enough. Black can let the knight out on g8 by playing king h6, g5, f5, and scooping up the e5 pawn.
Right. An act of generosity, perhaps.
Yeah, so we'll see if he finds h5. That's a cute idea. Oh, it looks like he played h6, almost getting there.
Oh, yeah. What's your line? The pawn got a little tired on its way there?
Exactly.
All right, very good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's hop back to the game between Tyler and Rob. That looks like we have some stuff happening there. So in this game, after we left it with the queen coming to f5, threatening to come to h5.
Waiting with bated breath for knight e3.
Yeah, and that is what Tyler played. So he's trying to force off one of these main attacking pieces. And after knight takes, pawn takes, Tyler's up a pawn. So we'll have to see if his technique is going to be what it needs to be to close out this game with the extra pawn.
Yeah, what do you think about taking with the f-pawn instead back there? I mean, I clearly it does less for your structure, but you do have an extra pawn in the center and play on the h-file. Is it too weakening to the king, or do you like this?
I think they're both okay. As a relatively new player, if I were Tyler, I'd take with the d-pawn. This way, nothing bad happens on the king side. I don't really have to worry about the g3 sacks. H5, H4 is less threatening when I have two pawns defending g3, so I certainly don't mind this.
Yeah, I think that's a good way of putting it. Yeah, very much so. So after just a couple of more moves while we're in the neighborhood, looks like Rob tried to slow down Tyler's queenside pawns with a5, And then there came rook a to c1, right? Simple
Very
and
nice.
good activation. Rook a to b8, trying to peg on this backward pawn, right? So actually, I like those couple of moves from Rob, fixing a weakness with a5 and then seeking to attack it. Really textbook stuff. I don't know if it's enough, right? He is down some material, but that's the kind of thing we like to see around here.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a little bit hard to defend that. Something like rook c3 allows this bishop to get active on b4. Even if we're sacrificing c7, this would give us some reasonable counterplay down the c file.
Yeah, yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. So yeah, I mean, queen to c4. Yeah, I don't like. Certainly, we can't bring the queen to c2. I think Rob trades there immediately and gets his pawn back and is probably doing extremely well. Yeah, it could be a little tricky. We'll see what Ty does with that. You know, a game we have not checked in on in a while is this game of Matt versus Aaron. So I
Mm-hmm.
would like to take the opportunity to see what's going on there. We had left them when they were just leaving the opening. Now, this game is proceeding a little bit more slowly than some of the others, which, frankly, I'm grateful for. We can catch up a little bit here. So after e6 by Aaron, Matt played c4. This makes good sense to continue the pressure. And then there came c5. These kinds of moves are always a little confusing for me. I have to think that that's not the right idea for black. This early, I think probably that white can at the very least try to stick Aaron maybe with an isolated pawn. But these mutual pawn tension positions, I always get a little bit confused. What do you think?
Yeah, I think we have to take the isolated pawn at some point by playing c takes d5. But black is doing okay. I think the development is sufficient to say that it's still roughly equal. We actually had knight c3 and knight c6 played in the game. And then finally we get this capture on d5, leading to the isolated queen pawn.
Right. Yeah.
White
Yeah.
played
That is
h3, which is a very common move in the London, giving white this h2 square. Aaron took on d4. Matt took back with the knight, and we had a trade of knights on d4, and the queen comes to d4. And now I think it's time to be a little bit concerned about this king in the center. So maybe a move like a6 to keep pieces out of b5.
Yeah. Yeah, that does look dangerous. Yeah, Aaron has played bishop to e7, and it does look like Matt was keeping his head up, playing bishop b5 check,
Mm-hmm.
forcing something to come back to the d7 square. Aaron made the choice of bishop d7, hoping for some trades, which does make sense. Also, probably knight back would hang his d pawn right away. This may
Oh, I
still.
think even
Ooh.
worse than that, it hangs the g pawn.
Oh yeah, I'm seeing that now. Yeah, I mean, can I try to have some compensation here by playing not bishop f7, but bishop f6?
Yeah, I think you have to try it, but I don't think it's enough.
Yeah, this is not exactly Nimzovich versus Alapin, which is a game
No.
I'm a big fan of. But that was also black grabbing on g2, where white had a little bit more of a developmental advantage. Yeah, this could end badly for black. We'll
Yeah,
see.
so here I would seriously consider taking and then castling, and we have already traded off two pairs of minor pieces against this isolated queen pawn. This would be a very nice edge for white.
Right,
The
right,
actual game continuation was rook c1 after bishop d7.
right.
Black took and played queen a5, so that will force this knight back to c3. And I think this is catching up to the live position now.
Yeah, that was a nice defensive job by Aaron, taking advantage of maybe an inaccuracy on Matt's part. Right. I certainly cannot criticize Matt too harshly for doing something principled like bringing another piece into play, but he did maybe tactically, unfortunately, miss the moment.
Yeah, although even here, I think this is very nice for white. Something like knight e4 will have to be played eventually. Obviously, we can't do that right now, but it's an isolated queen pawn, and again, white has traded off two minor pieces. I'd say it's a very nice edge for white.
Right. You know what's a game I haven't heard anything about in a bit? What's going on with Nick? Has he been able to dig anything out against Chris?
Let me take a look.
I'll do the same. So when we last left our players, they were on move 19. So it does look like we've had quite a bit of development since then, which I will go ahead and throw into the analysis here.
Perfect. Yeah, it does not look good for Nick, though. I think we can look at this very quickly and then move right along.
Right. Yeah. So when we left them, Nick was down some serious material. Bishop f2, knight came back to e6. Chris very smartly trying to open up his undeveloped king side, and creating some nice threats. Yeah. Yeah. I see what you mean. This is Nick trying to make the best of it, but forced into some very unpleasant moves.
Okay, so actually that was maybe a missed opportunity here. Instead of bishop d4, taking looks like it's almost leading to mate.
Yeah, not quite, right? Or actually probably very quickly, right? So something like king here would lead to, I think, rook followed by maybe bishop f7, and that's almost
I was
certainly...
thinking I would take here first, and now bishop f7, rook h6 looks unstoppable.
Right, right. Yeah, of course. Yeah, in fact, actually, there's no need for rook h6 because you hold the h4 square.
Yes, yeah. I was wondering if something like this would be sufficient, but I don't think it is. I think probably rook back to g6, and there are too many threats.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
okay.
but instead bishop d4 was played, and we're up a whole rook. I think we can leave that game now.
Right. Yeah, I think you're probably right.
All right.
Okay. So what about Charlie and Alex? How are things? Things seem to have slowed down a bit here.
Yeah, so it looks like after h6, White kind of recognizes that he has to do something drastic, so he played g4. After g4, the bishop hops into e2, starting to take away some of these squares, maybe parking the bishop on f3. And now rook b1 was played, trying to get something going. Black is having none of it. After rook b5, rook c1 was played. And now black went back to c4, just trying to shut down this bishop, which makes some sense. But again, it's very passive. And now we have rook a1 played. And black made the interesting decision to play d4 and try and win this e-pawn. I think I would probably wait on that. I don't think there's any reason to give up e4 just yet.
Yeah, or to let the knight out.
Yeah, exactly. This is what happens. And now we get to the live position with knight d2. And again, it's very nice for black. Black has a lot of extra center pawns. But the knight is out, and even though it's winning for black, it's less winning than it might have otherwise been.
Right. I really like something like bishop d5 here, just centralizing and controlling a lot of wonderful squares that keep the knight from doing anything too fun. And there are some sneaky checkmate ideas that come in here, although it does look like the king is always going to have the g3 square if I try and mate him in the corner.
Yeah, unless this h-pawn gets to h4, I'm not sure there are really going to be any of those mates.
Yeah.
So I think black played bishop b5, similar idea. Maybe with the idea of playing rook e2, chasing this knight and trying to queen this pawn.
Right. Yeah. I think that allows more activity than it needs to, though. Right. Knight f3 seems like a very good move here to at least get the knight to a better square and force the rook onto a slightly more awkward position.
Yeah. But, although I don't think we really have anything to be worried about. This should still be completely winning for black.
Yeah.
Even this, everything's held and it's perfectly fine.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
Bishop
yeah,
E2
interesting.
Is not a threat.
Interesting. The knight coming home, actually, cold comfort, really, given that we had at least some ideas maybe of some kind of perpetual situation while the knight was still holding back there.
Yeah, exactly. So we got to this position, and I think black is getting ready to start pushing that e-pawn.
Yeah, and it doesn't look very easy to deal with either. I mean, this bishop is going to do a great job of helping him to control those light squares.
Yeah, and here knight f6 looks like the most normal move. I'm sorry, king f6, maybe bringing the king to h4.
Right. Yeah. If knight e4, I think just king e5, and we've centralized another piece. And the knight, if he does not go home, he's going to have to hang that f3 pawn out there to keep him in the game.
Yeah, this looks like it's pretty bad for white already.
Yeah. Okay, moving right along. Let's check in on Tyler and Rob again. So we left Tyler with this decision of how to defend his b pawn. Ty decided to go to begin by playing e4 and give the queen a little pop in the mouth.
Yep.
The queen retreated to g6. I think reasonable enough. And then there came rook to b1. So he's making a bit of a passive defense, but also making the decision, I think, to hold on to the material for now and try to find something maybe to make trades later. Rob, not to be deterred, continuing to throw punches, throwing h5, I presume with the plan of h4 to try and weaken up this king. So very sensible. Tai stops that with h4, but we now see that there are going to be ideas of sacking on g3 for the rest of the game, with, at minimum, some ideas of maybe a perpetual check if this queen ever leaves the area, right? Queen g3 check,
Right.
queen h3 check, etc.
And now it looks like we had rook b4 and rook d1 attacking and defending this bishop. But the rook on b4 is very nice. It also pressures e4. So I think already it's a little bit hard to find a good move for white.
Yeah, it's tough. Having played h4 now, we can see how this move by Rob was really useful, because having provoked Tyler into playing h4, it's really hard to play f4, which is a move that I would have loved to have made at some point.
Yes, exactly. Although, again, I don't really want to push these pawns in front of my king until the queens are off.
No, that's a good point. And especially here, you can see that it would immediately, even with h2 back
Exactly.
in its home, it would hang this tactic.
Yeah, so after c5, I think bishop e3 is completely compelled. The rook is going to take on e4 no matter what, but at least this way we're not giving up a tempo, and we can maybe play like queen f3 and try and fight back that way.
Yeah, so Tai with 19 minutes and counting, actually just under 20 really, is having a think there, and we'll leave that as we check in on Matt versus Aaron. So let me see. So we had a couple of moves here. Queen a5 check had brought the knight back, and then we had very quickly both players castled. So let's put that on the board.
Mm-hmm.
And then bishop b4. This is something to do with the bishop. I'm not sure that it's really a goal that I'm interested in, to trade that knight away for this piece.
No, but we are forcing a3, so at least there's some softening of the queen side.
Right. Yeah, I see what you mean there. Okay, so a3 was played.
Actually,
as
I think
say.
you missed a move. I think the rook came to c8.
Oh, excuse me.
Not yet. I take it back. Okay, yeah, carry on. I'm jumping ahead. Here is
How
where the
dare
rook came
you?
to c8.
I've never once missed a move.
All right, and now here, I think I would probably try and keep the rooks on the board as white to keep my winning chances. Maybe something like rook d3. Matt chose to double. Aaron traded a pair of rooks. And I think already we're getting close to a draw with black. Not that Aaron is necessarily trying for a draw, but this knight is getting very active. The queen has some big threats, and I don't know what white should be playing here.
Oh, yeah. I mean, knight to e4 is on the board.
Yeah.
Aaron did not miss it, and this is a little tricky. I suppose we could play b4 here, although probably...
No, we really can't. That would lose instantly.
Oh, excuse me.
Yeah. Would anybody like to find the continuation?
Chat's got nothing.
Oh, Nick found it. Very nice, Nick. Knight takes
I
c3.
see it. Yeah, I see it. Yeah.
We're winning
okay.
at whole exchange.
Just goes to show that looking at 4 games at the same time, not the best for my tactical acumen.
Yeah, it's tough to relay moves and also think about them at the same time.
It's true.
That's
true.
why I'm here.
Yeah, no, very, very good. Yeah, that's an excellent tactic. So I suppose he's better served by just retreating to c1.
Yes, yeah, and that was definitely a tough break for Nick because he saw some of these knight forks in his game. So.
Ooh, yeah. Yeah, good.
And that game is officially over at this point. So, congratulations to Matt. Not Matt. Who was
Chris?
Chris. There we go.
Chris
Yes.
W took the victory in that one. Yeah.
Yes.
Good job by him, and that moves him. Let's just take a quick peek here. So with that win, that moves Chris up to 2 points. Right? It looks like he took an L, I guess, last round. So 2 points from 3, and I think doing very respectfully.
Yeah, so we can take a look at these standings. That will definitely bring up his results very nicely, and I think that puts him right in the running for the top of the pack.
Yeah,
It's hard
very
to
much.
say some of these vowels, huh?
Yeah, I don't know what it is.
Hey, if I get
Um,
like 80% of the vowels in a word, I'm pretty happy.
yeah, all sorts of things get dropped suddenly
I
when you
also
have a lot
change
of
and add
them.
letters all the time to my words.
Um, looks like we are having some. Okay, it looks like things are moving in Black's direction in the game of Charlie versus Alex.
Yeah,
Let
let's
me
hop
see.
back to that. I think that was
Yeah,
when we left that, we were left with a position where White had just thrown in this check and started to get active, hoping for some counterplay. But again, I think that it's probably going to be a little bit for naught because the Black King can get very active in a hurry. However, instead of bringing the king up, Black chose to play Rook d7 first. And of course, we really don't want to exchange here. But at the same time, this knight is doing yeoman's work covering all these holes. So maybe here we can start to get active with king g2. And I think probably Black's advantage is not so much here, although it still should be pretty winning for Black as something like bishop c6, and we're kind of boxing out the king nicely with this pawn and bishop combination.
it's going to be interesting to see if Charlie in this endgame can hang on long enough. I'm wondering if his greater experience, because he's certainly been playing chess a lot longer than Alex, will tell. Because I'm maybe the time pressure could bring something. I mean, especially in a time pressure situation, I think I'm happier to have the knight than I am the bishop, even with the disadvantages that Charlie clearly has.
Yeah, I think you're right. And White correctly kept the rooks on the board. It's a little bit crazy to trade rooks when you're down a pawn, and worse. Now Black played d3. I don't love d3. It's blocking in the bishop. The rook is not really threatening to support a pawn push to d2, so it just feels a little bit awkward right now.
Yeah, he may have just been thinking pass pawns must be pushed, which is certainly something you can find in many a chess book.
Yeah, and I don't
But
disagree with that logic. But I think taking the square away and the diagonal away from the bishop is a little bit of a detriment to that move.
yeah, yeah, a couple more moves happening here.
Yeah.
So
E5
both
was
players
played.
centralizing their kings.
Yeah, and at some moment I want to play knight e4. Probably I'm playing king e3 here. I think king e3 makes the most sense, trying to so I can put the king on d2.
Yeah.
Instead, he played h4. Black played g5, trying to force another pawn weakness on g4. White played h5. I think I would have taken this opportunity to trade a pair of pawns by taking.
Yes.
And
Yes, enthusiastically.
Yeah.
Yes, I think that this gives the knight something to attack.
Yeah, exactly. So we can't take back with the king, so we must take back this way. And now, exactly like you said, knight e4 threatens to pick off g5.
Yeah, and it looks like it does pick up a pawn, right? Well, now I think about
We
it.
can't let this run, so we
Right,
have to
it's a
play king
little
e3.
risky. Yeah,
Yeah.
just a little risky. That knight a little bit paralyzed there.
Yeah. So after the game, h5, king e6 was played, king e4, threatening this, which is a very nice threat. So Black has to play rook d4. And now I'm wondering if I can get away with king e3 or if I have to go back and defend the pawn. I think we have to defend the pawn.
Yeah, it looks like Charlie thought the same, right? King f3. Now Alex activating his king further,
Yep.
threatening the rook with king to d6. We have rook to c8, rook f4 check. A lot of different checking maneuvers happening here for a minute. And now this seems like a curious decision.
I think
Charlie-
you need to keep the king close to the pawn. I think going to g4 probably allows g4 and e4 and e3. So it's probably better to go ahead and give this g pawn.
I see. Yeah. So yeah, Charlie may be really getting down to
Yeah,
it. at
it's
this
pretty
point.
lost for white. So I think it'll just be a little bit of a technical exercise from here.
Right. Rook takes g4. Right. We go after the pawn. Yeah, a bunch more moves here happening pretty quickly. Right. Both players grabbing. Rook h3 check. Yeah. Yeah.
F3.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
this
And
is the
here,
position.
finally, after a flurry of moves, we've reached the present. One game that is not moving at that speed, it looks like, is Tyler's.
Oh yeah,
Tyler
let's hop back to that. It looks like Rob has just won a pawn.
Yeah, it looks like Tyler, after a very, very long think, played bishop to c3, which allows Rob to grab on h4. Now, I suppose. Oh, excuse me. Yeah, there were two moves there. So, oh, interesting.
Yeah, so
Oh, I
what
see. I
happens?
see. Yeah, yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
instead of
He
moving,
played
he played
e5.
e5. I see.
Yeah, I see. Okay, yeah, trying not to lose the e pawn. Yeah, I think probably he did not see this idea about the h pawn when he did this.
Yeah, and this is a big problem. This is going to get even worse before it gets better. Rook
Yeah,
g4 and h4 are coming in.
yeah. This looks like all of the mating ideas that White was playing for are now coming to fruition.
Yeah, so I think we probably have to play queen d3 and try and get these queens off the board.
Yes, I think that if he does that, he probably still has good chances for a draw. There are some weak pawns around on the dark squares that Tyler can attack, and I don't think that Black has quite enough to force any kind of win if he can get a good exchange and get his pieces activated. But if this attack continues, it's going to be lights out.
Yeah, and we actually just had a beautiful finish in the game
Hey
between
Charlie, I'm not
Charlie
sure if
and
you're there,
Alex.
but good game.
After the
I was really on edge till the very
rook
end.
rook h3 check f3. Black played rook h2 and threatening rook e2 mate. And unfortunately, it looks like White didn't see this threat. He threw in a check. The king moved, but now he just didn't see that this was a problem and that he has to jettison the f pawn to deal with that. And this was played, and rook e2 mate is on the board.
Wow. I mean, what an exciting finish. I mean, it's these are good players, but we saw this on Sunday with Nate versus Matt that sometimes in these tense games with so much going on, you can lose track of these end game checkmates. You don't think that a mate is coming in positions where there are so few pieces on the board, but there are whole puzzle books devoted to themes like this, of just finding a checkmate in the end game.
Yes, exactly. Some of my favorite tactics are these mating attacks with very few pieces.
Yeah, me too. I feel like a lot of players let their guard down, and I've stolen more than my share of points at this stage in the game. Sometimes when I was worse.
Yeah, so it looks like the game between Tyler and Rob kind of went the way we expected with queen d3 and rook e4. So let's hop back to the game between Matt and Aaron. After trading rooks, I think we left off. I think we had seen one more move after the trade of rooks. Knight e4 was played. After knight e4, instead of dropping the rook back, Matt went forward with rook c7. So he's threatening to pick off b7. He's also threatening rook d7 and taking here. And unfortunately, that does look like it allows queen e1 check, which looks like a big problem to solve.
Yeah, looks like Aaron didn't go for this. I don't know.
He played the interesting move g5 instead. I wonder if I still kind of prefer if you'll indulge me for a minute.
Yep, forgive me.
I think I prefer queen e1 check to g5, although g5 at least looks like an interesting approach. Something like this, and maybe now we have ideas of g5.
Yes, right where the bishop's retreat has been taken away.
Exactly.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. That seems very good. Even g5 maybe to come. I mean, something, certainly White gets a move here, but g5, maybe even f6 can be played afterwards, and that bishop might have to give itself up.
Yeah. After g5, though, this is a very double-edged position. White already has to find some difficult moves. Maybe bishop e5. Certainly bishop e2 would be really bad. This would hang mate in one.
Yeah.
So we'll try and avoid that.
Yeah.
Instead of that, I guess we would play bishop g3. And even here, after bishop g3, I think we can probably start taking things. This looks like it would be completely winning because this hangs the rook. And if bishop e5, I wonder if f6 is playable. It doesn't look playable. This looks pretty bad because we're giving up too many tricks. I think probably b4 and a4, and I don't see how we stay on the d5 pawn.
Yeah. Wow.
Even though we can take, this looks pretty bad.
This could get exciting, and it's probably a good thing because it looks like the game between Tyler and Rob may have just reached its denouement. So Ty making the correct decision, going back to this game here, making the correct decision to trade with queen to d3, and now Rob blocked with rook e4, which I don't think is a great move. I think
I don't mind that. I think that's reasonable. But I actually saw this tactic before, but it wasn't quite working. If this bishop were somewhere else, let's say something like bishop b2, rook e1 would be winning because we would not be able to take the rook because we hang the queen. And if we move the king, black now trades queens and picks off this loose rook on b1, which is a very nice motif. Unfortunately for Tyler, he made it even worse. He played rook e1 himself, which leaves the queen undefended and hangs the rook. So here he's just down an entire queen, and I think the game will be over pretty soon.
Yeah.
I think we had these moves, and Tyler resigned in this position.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Yeah, really nice tactical play from Rob there. You can't count that guy out. He had a tough game last week against Lydia, but he's come roaring back, I think, with some fighting spirit this week.
Yeah, very nice game. Very fun.
Yeah. Okay, so we're down to 2. We're down to 2, and that's at this moment. It's very important to note that all of the games played tonight have been excellent, and we thank everyone for participating as we move into this final game. It does look like something may be on in this one as well. We may have a rapid end to this program. As quickly as it ramped up, it may ramp down. So let me see. Returning to this game for a moment, we had left our heroes right around this g5 move. And after g5, we had seen by Matt, bishop takes g5, which is really not the best way to do things. Looks like there are multiple pieces hanging, and I think Aaron probably going to come away with the game.
Yeah, this it looks like it's kind of a bold way to play for white. Unless there's some tactical trick, I think it's probably going to be pretty losing. This looks like it's a whole rook, and I just don't see what happens after queen takes c7.
Yeah.
Actually, I don't know. Maybe it's not quite so bad because bishop h6 can be played. And this is actually very hard to defend without giving up perpetuals.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point.
I think we have to play f5.
Yeah, I was just thinking, though, that we could just as easily grab the bishop on g5, and that's probably still enough to win.
Yeah, I like being up a whole rook.
This is that kind of intricate analysis that you come to acceptable.
Yeah, exactly. So queen d5 would not work because queen f7 threatens to trade queens, and white doesn't have a good response to that. Right. Instead, I think we have to grab the rook, and now taking here would lead to some strange perpetuals. Even if we don't trade queens, all of a sudden we have a ton of pawns for the knight. So this looks like it's enough for white to hold.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we can circle back to the move that you suggested, taking the bishop off. We're not really threatening any mates, but this still looks like it's going to be reasonable for black. Something like knight e6 is probably happening relatively soon.
Right. Yeah, I think it's a little late in the program, but I would like to read out the last couple of our player bios because the players
that sounds great.
they went to the trouble to write these things, and I want to make sure that we get them out there. So with this game that we're watching now, we have Aaron K. His bio is very short and written in almost a poetic style. He wrote, 3D design for the man, farms MJ, writes songs, draws faces with one line, breaks ankles and drains mid-range jumpers, and chess master life goal. So very succinct and to the point, as we've come to expect from him. Now, as for Matt, let me pull this up. This came in very late. But a friend of his showed him a few tactics puzzles after he moved to Dallas for work in 2016, and then proceeded to beat him in about 4 straight games without having to think. He fell into chess gradually and has enjoyed it more and more. He loves watching excellent players analyze the all-time greats like Bobby Fischer, Paul Morphy, and Jose Capablanca, revealing and explaining exactly why they were such amazing players. And I have to say also, players, thank you so much for providing your photos. Andrew and I are still working out the technicals on how to get everything we want into the broadcast. But we do have them, and we'll try to make use of them for future.
We don't want to take away from the chess too much.
Right, exactly. People get distracted with everybody's beautiful faces. And the last pair that I also do not think that I got to was a game that has unfortunately now ended, which was between Chris and Nick. Chris started playing at school age, taught by his dad. He was never very serious. He had gone through phases of enthusiasm over the years, which I think we can all identify with to some extent. Mostly luck has outweighed skill level, with no serious study of tactics beyond the basics until recently. This tournament has sparked an interest to better understand opening techniques and strategy, with a goal on learning a handful of openings to give myself a fighting chance in the middle game. Thanks, Chris. We're glad we inspired something out of you. And as for Nick, we know that he had an unfortunate ending with the Black Pieces, but he is 31. He grew up and lives in Massachusetts and is a hospitality professional by trade. He started playing chess competitively in high school because John Harden, I know that guy, was his ride home from school. He managed to work his way up from board 6 to board 3 as the strong players, like yours truly and my compatriot here, graduated and were replaced by no one. Oh, come on, Nick. I think that's very nice to us, but a little bit ungenerous towards your teammates. This was the last time that Nick noted he was better than Aaron at chess. He spent the next 12 years losing the occasional blitz game and getting his board and clock cleaned by John. But lately, he started playing more often and even studying some gains in line. So, Nick, we're really glad that you're playing and that you are improving steadily. We have managed to read out all of the player bios and yet still not seen a move here in this last game. Aaron's still having a long think about this bishop g5 move.
Yeah, it's a scary position. I think it's well worth spending the time. Again, I think I'd grab the rook. I don't see a real downside to grabbing the rook. And when you can start to see perpetual ideas like this, it's nice to have that out.
Yeah, no, that does make perfect sense.
Something like this looks pretty atrocious because now the queens can get traded in some lines.
Right. Yeah, I have to think that that's something. He may just have missed it. I'm not sure.
Yeah, so we'll have to wait and see what happens. It certainly could go either way still.
Yes. Yeah, very much so. Whew. Man, I can barely remember everything that happened. That was a really incredible hour or so. It's hard to believe that that's all it was. We started this thing, at 7 o'clock, a little bit after?
Yes, it's gone quickly.
Yeah, so much action. Really good stuff. Yeah, it's interesting to note how much of it all is still continuing to come down to simple tactics. Especially with I think playing at home, sometimes over the board chess can be a wonderful resource for people. I find that there can be problems with playing online. That it can be difficult to concentrate with so much else going on.
Yeah, I agree, especially when you get to some of these sharper positions, and it looks like a normal position. It looks like something that you just want to play normally, but you don't necessarily take the effort to look into that next level and really think about the moves the way that you do when it's an over-the-board game.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's easier to make these blunders, but I think partially too that there's a lot of pressure, and I think people take this tournament really surprisingly seriously, but I'm thrilled that they do, because the tournament is so much more enjoyable and more fun to be in when everybody commits and makes something out of it. But I think also getting used to playing high pressure games is something that a lot of these players are doing. I don't think that most of these players really have a lot of over the board experience, with sort of official rated games.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a very different experience to do that as opposed to playing in some of these online tournaments.
Yeah, very much so. Well, let's do something a little bit different here. I mean, since we have the opportunity, I'd love to see this game out. I'm told I'm just getting this over the lines that we do have Nick R standing by to do a post-game interview, talk about his experience. So yeah, I've just sent out an invite. We'll see if we can get Nick on here.
Awesome. While you're pulling that up, I will continue to take a look at this game. It really looks like we're going to have to wait and see how everything goes from here. I'm not quite sure what will happen with Black's move. Aaron has a couple of choices. Obviously, when we can throw in this check, you have to look at these forcing moves, these checks, and then 2 captures. There are just so many hanging pieces right away. Once again, like taking the rook looks like the most natural move, especially when we do have these perpetuals. I do think that taking the bishop makes a lot of sense. This solves all the mate threats. The bishop and the queen coordinate very, very nicely. And then it looks like, yeah, Aaron just captured on g5.
Aaron did finally take the bishop way out of things.
Yeah, so I think that this is good for Black. Aaron is still threatening to take on c1. And then we will wait and see what White does in response to this. I think probably he's going to have to move his rook. I'm not quite sure where he's going to move it, though. Maybe something like rook c5 is interesting, but even rook c5, I'm not quite sure that's going to be enough. He played queen g4, so a similar idea, pinning the knight. But again, this is still a hanging piece. White's idea is just that if Black takes, we immediately force a perpetual. Yeah, so we'll have to wait and see what happens with that. So I think we have Nick on the line now, so I'm going to bring him and John back in. And Nick, thank you for joining us.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So we know that you had a bit of a tough break there. Take us through your experience of that game, and let's go ahead and put it back on the board here. It looked like a pretty reasonable opening, you know, some fairly normal moves by both sides. But yeah, did trading the queens take you by surprise? Where did you feel that it started to go off the rails? Was it just a simple oversight? I mean, obviously, knight takes e7 was a tough spot, but you know, were you largely playing the game you wanted to play, or did it get uncomfortable from the very beginning for you?
So I had looked at what he had been playing, and I thought I had seen a little more e4, so I was kind of did some prep on e4 openings, which I typically don't actually end up facing too much. He went right into d4, and so I had to come up with a new plan right away, which is never a fun thing. I decided I'm not the biggest Black player. I'm more of a kind of an aggressive attacking White player. So to play Black, I was like, I'll castle up. I'll make a good defense. I didn't want to let him get too much before I was able to do that. And I ended up being just a little too slow. And then once we got to the point where I had to trade queens, I knew it was going to be a tougher game. And I just really was just not thinking hard enough on it. He kind of lulled me in with a lot of quick moves. I'm sure you can see at this point there's maybe like 3 minutes taken off the clock in total.
Yeah, really, really fast, aggressive play out of Chris W. Yeah.
And so at this point, I should have taken the extra 20 seconds, or maybe not this point, but in a little bit, and gone with like c8, obviously, defended that fork, as opposed to what I ended up going with. His bishop here that we're showing on screen is killed me all game. All game that pin on the knight was just very tough to play around the whole time, trying to avoid losing pieces and that sort of a thing.
Yeah, John and I discussed bishop e7 instead to try and break the pin. But even this is no picnic because of this check and knight b5 ideas. It's just a difficult position to play. Something like this allows knight d5 and the knight just kind of festers there. Maybe you can play bishop d8 and survive. This looks like the best practical approach, maybe.
Yeah, certainly a better position than I had, so would have been an improvement.
Yeah, I think. I mean, even here, maybe just though, like it's still a tough spot. I mean, I'll put the bishop on this long diagonal,
yeah, that looks like it would win a piece almost. Like if we play something lazy like this and allow a bishop h3 idea, knight f6 is.
Or even just knight back, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, even just knight back, I think, and there's nothing you can do.
Yeah, you have to play f5 and hope that you can escape with something like c6. So it's, again, I think we have to play c6 here and tuck the king onto a good square.
It does look like we have movement in Matt versus Aaron here. So moving back, we had just seen Matt put queen g4 on the board.
Yes.
And Aaron made the decision just to step out of the pin and play king to h8. So leaving Matt again with a decision. And I gotta think that this is still in Black's favor, but maybe, I guess these perpetual ideas, right, of queen f6 and queen g5 are still on.
Yeah, I think we can safely take on g5 now. There's no good defense to queen f6 and at least a perpetual. Something like queen b6 does stop that, but we're not winning anymore. And probably queen e5 to shore up b2, and then I can think about what to do with this rook. And this looks like it's pretty nice for white already.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I think, I'm not even sure if Matt has reached this position that often, something like this. So, it's interesting to see is he thinking about the perpetual ideas, or is he just trying to get himself some kind of bigger attack? Because I think his mindset right now could make a huge difference in the outcome of this game. If you're okay with a draw, you recognize the situation, I think you take that knight right away. The fact that he's having a long think here makes me suspect that maybe he's going to try and save that rook with something like rook takes b7, and probably then Black.
Yeah, no, you have to take the knight. Anything else is a little bit crazy.
Right. So the fact that
he did. So
I tell a lie.
Yeah.
There it is.
Yeah.
Okay.
When he's playing moves like bishop takes g5 and allowing this rook to be captured, I think you're seeing these ideas already. So he's well primed to find these patterns, which is nice.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, Aaron pretty well forced now, I think, to take the rook. Hard to see what he can do otherwise.
Yeah, I don't see anything else. Queen b6 or queen a6 look like the only other move that makes any sense at all.
Right.
Rook g8 would lose right away to queen f6 with a nice little mate in 3.
Yeah.
And
I have a feeling that's exactly what Matt is hoping for right now.
Yeah, exactly. Although Aaron's not quite going to fall for that, so I think he'll find something a little bit better.
No, I would be very surprised. I think Aaron, I will remind our viewers, took the entire tournament down last time, and I know him to be a strong player who comes to these games, I think, with a lot of focus. So I would be very shocked to see that ending. But of course, none of us is above it.
Yeah. Yep. One little crazy idea that I'm looking at is if we play something like queen b6 or queen a6, we might have queen e7, and the main idea is that rook to g8 runs into queen e5 check, hitting the king on this diagonal, and now f6 is less good, and we have queen back to e7, and this mate is pretty unstoppable.
Yeah, I mean, you can go ahead and give the lady, I guess, but I think at that point...
That's just technically losing, so I'm not sure that would make much sense. So this little triangulation is kind of cute.
It's funny. I have to say, it is kind of funny to note that I felt like these players were taking a lot of time and really going through things slowly, but they're starting as the last game of the evening. They still both have plenty of clock.
Yeah, they both have over 15 minutes, so I think this is good for Aaron. He'll have a chance to look... his main point is that Aaron can take the rook, and I think it's nothing better than a perpetual. The queen defends too many dark squares, so you certainly don't have time for h4, h5, h6. And if Black gets even one move, he's going to play f5 or f6, and the queen will swing back to the defense.
Let's say that this does end in a draw, as certainly would be a reasonable outcome, I think, at this point. I mean, if I'm Aaron and can see how dangerous this is getting, I think probably I'm willing to take that result. Where does that leave us in the standings overall? Aaron has dropped a game and now would be holding a draw. So is he completely out of it? He's right. Where would that leave him?
I think he would still have some fighting chances, but that would certainly put him well behind in the standings, which would is certainly not what he's hoping for. I think he's hoping to win the tournament. So we can take a look at that in one brief moment.
Of course. Yeah, and while you're getting those for us, Nick, who do you like to win it all?
I mean, it's tough. There's a lot of strong players in this tournament. I think certainly some stronger players than we had last time.
Some of them the same players.
Yeah, a lot of them are. I know Aaron's always a threat. I've played with him. Me and him have actually played a lot of games during this tournament just in person. And if I didn't see this position here, I would think he would have a very good shot to repeat. I know I played Rufus earlier, and he played a very strong game against me, and I've seen him play some good games elsewise. I'm not super familiar with all the players. I think there's one or two new players I've seen at the top of the stand-ins that have surprised me with really strong play out of the gate.
I think Nate and Alex are both strong contenders. They've both had good tournaments last time and seem to be coming on well. But I think my betting money's still on Rufus B here. I think he's probably my current favorite, given that he is in the driver's seat, controls his destiny, as they say, and has been known for success in the past. Although he did have a very tough out against Chip this morning. So I think it just goes to show there are no sure things in any round of this tournament. I think there's a lot of even matchups, and it's always a game of chess.
Yeah, so I've just pulled up the other standings, the up-to-date standings, assuming that this last game is a draw.
Yes, I think it is, actually. I do want to look at those before we sign off, but it does look like Aaron finally took the rook, and we are getting this perpetual check.
That makes perfect sense. I think it's a very quick way for the game to end, but that is the most logical finish to the game after the king is so open, and unfortunately Black doesn't have anything better without hanging mate, so it's kind of something that's forced.
Dubious wins are wins. Yeah, I have more than my share of dubious wins, Rufus, not to worry. I think an exciting draw. I think just goes to show that they don't all have to be boring. I think that was a pretty interesting tactic. I think as we'll look at later in the deeper analysis, I think Aaron had some chances to take that game, but Matt found a way to mix things up and create confusion, and it paid off for him.
Yeah, it's been a fun couple of games. I think it certainly throws the tournament into a nice state where there are 6 people at the top of the leaderboard, all within striking distance. And it might even be more than that when we see a couple of the later games this round. I think there are a few tomorrow, and then we'll see what happens over the weekend as well.
Yeah, really exciting. I think that I enjoyed this post-game player interview. I think we'll see if we can pull up a few more of those over the course of these live streams, because they are fun. But I think for now, probably we'll let things go and just say thank you all so much for watching. I mean, that was a really exciting quartet of games. We'll obviously have the roundup where we're going to look at them all in more detail and with calmness of mind on Sunday evening at 7:00 Eastern. So we'll be back there, and we'll see you in the chat. And we obviously have a few more games to play over the weekend, so very excited to see those. And Nick, thank you for joining us.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Yeah, we'll love to have you back at some point. So without further ado, I'm John Harden, and for National Master Andrew Hoy and my friend Nick here, thank you so much for watching Acceptable Chess.